Job security is dead. Just ask those 94,000 tech employees laid off in the first half of 2025. Not because of AI, not because of cheap overseas labor, but because companies stopped seeing workers as assets and started treating them as costs to be cut the moment things get tough. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when companies were forced to treat workers like investments, and it all traces back to one bold decision by a man who accidentally invented job security and whose playbook was later used to kill it. In the early 1900s, working life was chaotic. Factory shifts were long, dangerous, and disposable. If you lost a finger, you lost your job. There were no protections, retirement plans, or health benefits, just brutal hours and the looming threat of being replaced. That is, until Henry Ford changed the game. In 1914, Ford stunned the business world by offering factory workers $5 a day, double the prevailing wage, and introduced the 8-hour workday. Not because he was being generous, but because high turnover was killing productivity. Workers kept quitting. Training new ones was expensive. So Ford made a radical move. Treat labor like an investment, not a cost. It worked. Productivity skyrocketed. Employee loyalty soared. And suddenly, other companies had to compete for workers too, not just customers. Benefits became a business strategy. Over the next few decades, industries followed Henry. Pensions, healthcare, and vacation days were added to sweeten the deal. And after World War II, with unions gaining power and the government encouraging homeownership and stability, a new model emerged. You give us your loyalty, we'll give you a future. By the 1950s and 60s, that promise became standard in corporate America. You didn't just have a job, you had a career, a ladder, or a long-term plan. But it wasn't generosity, it was leverage. Because once your healthcare, retirement, and identity are all tied to one company, walking away doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like losing your life. So, was job security ever truly secure, or just the most elegant trap corporate America ever built? But the 1970s, the promise of job security started to wobble. Factories that once powered entire towns began shutting down, not because business was bad, but because labor was cheaper elsewhere. Deindustrialization swept across the West. Assembly lines moved overseas. Entire communities were gutted in the name of efficiency. Unions, once the backbone of worker power, started losing ground. Membership dropped. Bargaining power crumbled. And then came the final blow: Reagan-Thatcher deregulation. In the 1980s, Western leaders launched a full frontal assault on labor protections. Free markets became the gospel. And in boardrooms across America and Britain, a new ideology took hold: maximize shareholder value. Suddenly, a company's duty wasn't to its worker, its community, or even its long-term health. It was to quarterly profits and stockholders. Executives were rewarded for cutting costs, and the biggest cost? Labor. Layoffs weren't a failure anymore, they were a business strategy. It didn't matter how long you'd been loyal or how good you were at your job. If the spreadsheet said cut, you were gone. The message was clear: you're not family, you're not an investment, you are an expense. And just when workers thought it couldn't get more unstable, a new kind of job showed up, one that promised freedom, flexibility, and control. But behind the shiny app and 5-star ratings, it wasn't a job at all. 36% of US workers, around 58 million people, now participate in the gig economy. The gig economy didn't just replace jobs, it redefined what work even means. There's no safety net, benefits, or guarantees, just hustle in exchange for freedom. It all started with a simple pitch: be your own boss. Work when you want, where you want, however you want. Just you, your skills, and endless opportunity. At first, it sounded like a dream, but it wasn't a dream, it was a rebrand of something much older and much cheaper. See, when companies laid off full-time employees, they didn't stop needing the work done. They just stopped hiring people they'd have to protect. Instead of salaried staff, they brought in consultants, freelancers, and contractors. The work stayed, the responsibility disappeared. Gig platforms took it further: Uber, DoorDash, TaskRabbit. They don't employ people, they just connect customers to workers, then wash their hands clean. No healthcare, paid time off, severance, just 5-star ratings and a mountain of risk for the worker. And sure, on paper, some freelancers do earn more per hour than salaried employees. But let's do the math. Let's say you bring $70,000 a year freelancing. Now subtract $8,000 in health insurance premiums, $6,000 in self-employment taxes, $4,000 lost to unpaid sick days and downtime, $2,000+ for your own equipment, software, and client acquisition. What's left? a number that looks a lot like a regular job, except now you're doing everything alone. When you are a freelancer, you're not just the employee, you're also the admin, the accountant, the marketer, and the collections agent. And if one of those breaks down, you don't get paid. Worse, the algorithms that run these platforms are black boxes. One bad review, one policy change, and suddenly you're shadow banned. No appeal, explanation, or paycheck. Writers, designers, editors, teachers, and even therapists, all trying to outbid each other online, racing to the bottom while selling freedom on LinkedIn. It's not freedom, it's just precarity, repackaged as empowerment. And it's spreading because the gig mindset isn't just for gig workers anymore. It's bleeding into the corporate world, where full-time roles are being chopped into temporary contracts, outsourced projects, and zero-hour schedules. And just when workers started adjusting to this new game, a new player entered the field. One that doesn't need sleep, health insurance, or even a paycheck. Because the gig economy didn't kill stable work. AI came to finish the job. Goldman Sachs estimated that 300 million jobs could be affected globally by AI automation. For decades, we told ourselves a lie. If I just learn the right skills, I'll always be needed. But now, AI is learning those same skills faster, cheaper, and without ever sleeping. It started quietly. Robots took over factory lines, automated checkouts replaced cashiers. Trucking began experimenting with driverless routes. But then came the real plot twist. AI moved up the ladder. It started writing emails, then copywriting, then graphic design, run customer service, and even evaluate job applicants. White-collar workers, the ones who thought they were immune, are realizing something terrifying. If your job can be done in front of a screen, it's already being tested against an algorithm. From a business perspective, AI is a dream. It doesn't get tired, doesn't demand equity, doesn't organize a union. It just works 24/7, infinitely scalable. Why pay a $70,000 salary when a $20 a month subscription gets the same output? This isn't just about efficiency anymore. It's about survival in a system where shareholder value matters more than human labor. So we keep hearing the same phrase, upskill or be replaced. But here's the uncomfortable truth. What happens when there's no skill left that humans have a monopoly on? We're not just talking about jobs here, we're talking about value. In a system where our worth is defined by what you can produce. And if AI can produce more, where does that leave us? Job security was never about protecting workers. It was about controlling them. Because when your rent, healthcare, and dignity depend on keeping that job, you'll tolerate almost anything. Fear of job loss equals obedience. That's why corporations don't need chains. They use performance reviews, quiet quitting, hustle culture, toxic positivity. All symptoms of a workforce scared to say no. But as the great Peter Gibbons would say, if one works only in the fear of losing their job, it will make them work just hard enough to not get fired. And the worst part, they'll think it's their fault. Keep your head down, don't complain, be grateful you have a job. But now, even that illusion is starting to crack. The irony is that the system still needs workers to survive. It needs people to make the products, drive the trucks, code the apps, and serve the food. But it also needs those same people to stay powerless. Because the moment they organize, question, or push back, the illusion collapses. That's why stability is sold like a luxury car. You're told to chase it, a stable income, a stable home, a stable job. But behind the scenes, wages stay flat, prices rise, and the second your productivity drops, you're gone. You're no longer a good fit. They want a stable output, not a stable you. Because if workers were truly stable, mentally, financially, socially, they'd stop accepting instability as normal. If the system is this broken, why doesn't everyone just quit? Debt, health insurance, immigration status, family, rent is due next week. Even the idea of starting over feels like a luxury for people who already have money. And then there's shame. Shame for being unemployed, for not hustling harder, for wanting more than survival. They've rigged the game so that even questioning the rules feels like failure. And yet, every once in a while, someone does walk away. They break free, they speak out, they take the hit, and build something better. But when they do, half the world calls them crazy. The other half secretly wonders, would I do it too?